Tēnā koutou te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Tēnā koutou nā manuhiri, no mai, haere mai ki tēnei whare karakia a te atoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. A warm welcome to you all this morning. As we gather together this morning in this space made sacred over the last 116 years by Auckland Unitarians, may we learn to recognize and affirm the pieces of possibility, the bits of good we bring. May we encourage rather than control, love rather than possess, enable rather than envy, allowing our individual gifts to weave a patchwork of peace. The soft, deep blue of sensitivity and understanding, the red energy of creativity, the white heat of convictions, the risky, fragile green of new growth, the golden flashes of gratitude, the warm rose of love. Each of us is indispensable if we are to minister to a broken and wounded world. Together in our gathered diversity, we form the whole. So be it. We especially welcome you this morning if you're a visitor just passing through or seeking a spiritual home. Know that we're very pleased and honored by your presence. You should also know our worship service is only the prelude to morning tea. It is our sacrament of hospitality. Please join us. It won't be complete without you. For my opening words, I'd like to read a portion of The Miraculous Pitcher by Barbara Road. During the hot Nebraska summers of my childhood, I spent hours high in my treehouse devouring the books I found in the small collection my parents had acquired from estates of various relatives. One of my favorite was a wonder book, Nathaniel Hawthorne's retelling of classical myths. My favorite of those stories was The Miraculous Pitcher, the story of Baucis and Philemon. This elderly, poor, but generous-hearted couple invite two gods, disguised as beggars, to come into their cottage to rest and eat. The gods keep asking that their bowls be replenished, and the old couple becomes sad and embarrassed because they know the pitcher is empty. But the gods show them otherwise. No matter how often they pour from the pitcher, it is always full. I suppose as a child, what I liked was the thought of possessing such a pitcher. Much later, I realized that in some sense I did. The story of the miraculous pitcher seems to be telling us that in the realm of the spirit, there is no such thing as non-renewable resource. That is an important concept. Most of us have it backward. For centuries, we have had it backward. We have believed that material resources are infinite, but the resources of the spirit need to be hoarded with care. We act as if the supply of oil can go on forever, but that there are limits to the amounts of love we can give away. How often I have found myself closing off from people in need because I was afraid of being spiritually drained, only to find myself in the driest of deserts. We have arrived at a time in our history when we are beginning to realize that this planet is our only home. We can no longer make a mess of the place where we are and then move on. A species can come to an end. Resources can be used up. All growth is not a sign of health. But I suspect we doubt more than ever the truth of the story of the miraculous pitcher. we find it hard to believe that we will find the spiritual nourishment to meet the needs of this chaotic age. The wisdom of the centuries and our own experience tell us otherwise. If we do not let our fears have dominion, we may discover in the midst of pain we find inner strength. In the midst of bewilderment we find inner clarity. In the midst of nourishing another we find ourselves nourished. We light this chalice, spark of the original fire of creation, to remind us that we all on this planet, the furred, the feathered, the finned, and the scaled, along with us featherless bipeds, we are all made of the same star stuff and all share a common destiny. We all share the same hopes of a life free from harm and suffering, and the same aspirations of happiness, love, and flourishing. Being able to express our own unique natures and capacities as best we may. We are just that many diverse perspectives from which the whole is seen and experienced. We are inextricably intertwined, interconnected, and interdependent. And it is good. Something was off when I woke up in my dorm room in late January 1969. I realized I couldn't hear the ocean, which was only 75 meters from my bedroom at the University of California, Santa Barbara. The sea was silent. I and other early risers went to the cliffs overlooking the normally pristine coastline. The ocean waves were weighed down by oil and tar, unable to crash on the beach. We had heard, of course, that one of the oil drilling platforms in the Santa Barbara Channel had had a blowout a couple of days earlier. But the Union Oil Company had assured us only a few thousand barrels of crude oil had escaped before it was capped. A barrel of oil, I had to look it up because I had no idea, is 42 US gallons, or 159 liters. That sounds like a lot of oil, but the capping didn't work. And eventually, an estimated 80,000 to 100,000 barrels of oil were released. In the 11 worst days of the spill, 35 miles of coastline were tarred with the crude. Eventually, ocean currents would carry it as far as San Diego, 200 miles south of the blowout, and to Pismo Beach, 100 miles north. The soiling of the beaches was bad enough, but the real tragedy was the death of over 10,000 seabirds, dolphins, seals, and sea lions, as well as countless fish and the destruction of their kelp bed habitat. This was the worst such environmental disaster in history. It would be another 20 years for one that was worse, the Exxon Valdez in Alaska, and another 21 years before what the worst is now, the BP blowout in the Gulf of Mexico. The community came out in droves to save as many as possible of the seabirds and mammals dying on the beach. It was heartbreaking work that left us often disappointed when we went home exhausted to practically bathe in tar remover. Only hundreds were saved. It would take years for the environment to recover. But in the moment, it mobilized those trying to clean up the oil company's mess. Residents of Santa Barbara had protested since the late 19th century the granting of oil drilling rights in what geologists considered an unstable seabed. Their fears having been realized, anger boiled over, and organizations like GOO, Get Oil Out, were formed to bring political pressure to bear. Because of its beauty and climate, Santa Barbara had long been home to the rich, famous, and powerful. That quickly made a local story national news. The outrage spread. Richard Nixon had just become president. He couldn't care a toss for the environment, but he saw political opportunity. He was the first president to establish national agencies to protect the environment. Democrats weren't going to let him have all the glory. Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin proposed in the Senate that April 22nd be proclaimed Earth Day as an environmental teach-in in direct response to the day the sea went silent in Santa Barbara. According to Wikipedia, the first Earth Day celebrations took place on April 22nd of 1970. In 2,000 colleges and universities, roughly 10,000 primary and secondary schools, and hundreds of communities across the United States. More importantly, it brought 20 million Americans out into the spring sunshine for a peaceful demonstration in favor of environmental reform. It is now observed in 192 countries and coordinated by the nonprofit Earth Day Network. Earth Day is now the biggest, largest secular holiday in the world, celebrated by more than 1 billion people every year. After the first Earth Day, people were energized to defend Mother Earth. In the US, the Environmental Protection Agency was created. Clean Air and Clean Water Acts were passed. Internationally, environmental activists began to organize. Greenpeace was launched in 1970. Greenpeace and Kiwis have been allies even before the Rainbow Warrior was sunk in Auckland Harbor by the French. The nuclear-free movement and battle against genetic engineering, GE-free, had both had a strong presence in New Zealand. Since the sea went silent, hundreds of international and national government agencies and NGOs have been established around the world focused on environmental protection and stopping climate change. With all this activity on behalf of Mother Earth, 49 years after that fateful morning looking out on the silent sea, I have to wonder why we're still pursuing extinction with headlong abandon in our disregard for her health and well-being. This week alone, we have suffered 2 Category 2 storms that have crippled our largest city. We have twice been in the crosshairs of 2 cyclones in the last month. We had the warmest summer on record, raising seawaters to temperatures well above normal, affecting fish migrations. Ocean swimmers have had to check a website to see what beaches are safe after a storm, and 3 out of 4 of our rivers are no longer safe for swimming. No informed person doubts that these are consequences of climate change. In the country of my birth, I'm watching Trump decimate all the limited protections Nixon and even Reagan afforded the environment. The Congress is getting ready to approve a climate change denying coal baron as the number 2 man at the Environmental Protection Agency, even as its number 1 is being accused of gross corruption. Trump has rolled back requirements for better fuel efficiency of cars by executive order and continues to trumpet the mining of coal. In New Zealand, where the new government made clear in the recent campaign that the environment was one of its primary concerns, it is getting bashed by conservative media for fulfilling its promise to grant no future licenses for oil and gas exploration off our shores. I have a Unitarian friend in Florida that I talk to weekly, who, when I told him we were slowly working towards getting rid of plastic bags at supermarkets, he lamented that in Florida, the state legislature passed a law preventing any city in the state passing a law preventing their use. This is in spite of a recent report of a plastic dump larger than the size of France floating in the ocean. These atrocities committed against our planet are just the tip of the iceberg. Every day, the news brings reports of further degradation of the environment. It is no surprise to anyone here of my commitment to various social justice issues: homelessness, the living wage, immigration reform, full inclusion of the rainbow community, racism, gender equality, supporting unions, freedom of and from religion, and peace. But the most important social justice issue we face is protecting the environment. Climate change will have an impact on all the others, or make them irrelevant in the face of needing to survive. I'm baffled by humanity's failure to act in the face of overwhelming evidence. We are Unitarians, after all. We love facts, especially the scientific kind. Many of us are well read as to what they are. Most of us probably saw Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. We know about rising CO2 levels and their impact on the environment. We know that these changes are not naturally occurring, but the result of human use of fossil fuels. Why don't others understand this? I admit there is some hope on the horizon. The Paris Agreement to lower global temperatures entered into force on 4 November 2016, with 175 of 197 countries having ratified it. We have yet to see how individual countries will meet their obligations. It turns out that facts don't have any use unless they reinforce our existing values. If they don't support our values, we take it personally. We dig in and double down. So much for humans being rational. But the last US election already made that point. Apparently, according to social scientists, our receptivity to the importance of environmental issues, including climate change, has nothing to do with how many facts we can throw at them. It has to do with identity and ideology. A climate change denier experiences all of our scientific facts as bashing, much like how Unitarians feel when an evangelical comes after us armed with the Bible. The more information we throw at someone who has based their identity on rejecting climate change, the more we may be making them more entrenched. Ironically, the facts may only be polarizing us further, just at a time when we need to be joining hands with everyone to save ourselves. Once we're gone, the planet will survive. The sea will no longer be silenced, but we will be. As Unitarians, perhaps we should spend more time focusing on our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, if we want to realize our seventh, respect for the interdependent web of all existence. Social scientists have discovered that if we really want to advance acceptance of climate science, we don't begin with the science. Begin with connecting with the person. We need to focus on how climate change affects us personally. Even better if it is about how it affects something we already care about. Find a shared value with the person. Just because you don't begin with a shared concern about climate change doesn't mean you don't have other shared values. Once you identify real shared values, connect the dots between that and climate change. You may have seen one story in the Herald after the worst of this week's storms told of a man who heard a terrible noise during it. He went outside to find a roof in his neighbor's yard. He asked whose it was. He was given the bad news. It was his. His verbal expletive can be easily guessed, but it is an opportunity to connect the dots. Less dramatic opportunities are parents worrying about their children on the playground exposed to excessive heat and UV rays, skiers wondering why ski resorts are bare, fishers wondering where the fish have gone from their favorite fishing holes, hunters wondering why game has become scarce, farmers worried about lower yields due to too much or too little rain. No one is not affected negatively by climate change, whether they acknowledge its reality or not. That is the place to begin connecting. But connecting is not enough. Social scientists tell us that when a problem seems too big, we become overwhelmed by a sense of powerlessness. Then the normal human response is to either deny or ignore the problem. Where climate change is concerned, there are many small and large things we can do individually and corporately to reduce our carbon footprint. If you're not sure what they are, a quick Google search will give you numerous ideas. Then explore them and their benefits with those with whom you have connected over shared values. As Auckland Unitarians, we are not allergic to facts. And besides, they reinforce the 7 values we share. They are on the wall for all to see. I'm sure everyone here has taken steps to reduce their carbon footprint to some extent. But can we do better? Perhaps this Earth Day we can commit to supporting each other to become even greener here in our homes and in our workplaces. We have an AGM coming up on May 20th. I'd like to challenge us to discuss at that time practical ways we can facilitate and support such an endeavor. I'm giving you plenty of time to think about it. Amen. My meditation is by Thomas Starr King. There's a Unitarian seminary in Berkeley, California, named after him. He was a major figure in California history, keeping California out of the Confederacy prior to the Civil War. But he was considered a wise and brilliant man at his time. What I'm going to read is a portion of a sermon he gave at that time. I believe that if on every Sunday morning before going to church, we could be lifted to a mountain peak and see a horizon of 600 miles enfolding the copious splendor of the light on such a varied expanse. Or if we could look upon a square mile of flowers representing all the species with which the creative spirit embroiders a zone. Or if we could be made to realize the distance of the earth from the sun, the light of which travels every morning 12 million of miles a minute to feed and bless us, at which the force of gravitation pervades without intermission to hold our globe calmly in its orbit and on its poise. If we could fairly perceive through our outward senses one or two features of the constant order and glory of nature, our materialistic dullness would be broken. Surprise and joy would be awakened. We would feel that we live amid the play of infinite thought, and the devout spirit would be stimulated so potently that our hearts would naturally mount in praise and prayer. I invite you to think about what that vision would look like as opposed to the one I saw 49 years ago off the cliffs. As we go forth from this sacred space, may we celebrate Earth and our shared lives. May we recognize our connections to all that is in and on land, on Earth. May we truly and deeply value the inherent worth of all in this awesome interconnected web of existence. May we commit ourselves to a new way, and may we hold our commitments and each other gently, yet firmly.